Okay, we're back. Let's get down to it. The serious business of this. So the last video I did, that was basically introduction to the whole thing. Overall view of what things were going to be as spoken about. Right, let's get into it. So I'm going to be doing the episode 1 and 2 now, and then we'll see how it goes, because this is quite heavy. All right. Well, thank heavens it's not that long. So let's get into it.
Hello everyone, Ernest Roots here from Lex Libertas. Today I'm diving into the first part of our series, Unmasking the Bully Within, the persecution of minorities by South Africa's ruling elite. This video is a discussion of the first section of the report, which contains 10 sections about the different ways in which minorities in South Africa are persecuted by the country's ruling political elite. This section focuses on violent and genocidal rhetoric against minorities.
And this is the thing. Whether you are white or black, you haven't got a say. You haven't got a voice. This whole country is run by ANC, Juju, MK. Those top ones. And they are actually dictating your life, your future. And that is what Marxism, socialism, communism does. So, continue.
How it has become normalized in our politics and why it is so dangerous. So let's break it down.
White man, you must die like a slave.
Okay, I just want to actually point out something now. Who hit that black man? Are there, okay, any white people there? Not a chance. Which culture is more violent, more actually prone to this? And they love doing fires and this. They love it.
White man, you must die like a slave. In a hand, Futzak, white man, Futzak, white man, Futzak, all white men, the bitches, all white men, the bitches.
As we have been told ad nauseum for the last few decades, South Africa's post-1994 era promised freedom, justice, and equality for all. But instead, we have seen an alarming rise in rhetoric that targets ethnic minorities, especially Afrikaners. And when I say target, I don't mean rhetoric that is offensive or words that we don't like. I mean repeated public statements about the extermination of ethnic minorities, including calls to violence. These claims are almost always dressed up as merely seeking to address historical wrongs. But the claim is semantical at best. I'll walk you through a short version of the history, the key players, and the links to actual violence. So first, let's talk about the notorious Kill the Boer chant in context, because we are told that we need to remember the context of this chant. This chant exploded internationally when the American President Donald Trump displayed a video of it during a meeting with President Ramaphosa in the White House in
They were all laughing.
2025.
That was funny.
We have thousands of stories talking about it, and we have documentaries, we have news stories, and that. Is Natalie here? Somebody here to turn that? I could show you a couple of things, and it has to be responded to. Yeah, sure. Let me see the articles, please, if you would, and turn the lights down. Turn the lights down, and just put this on. It's right behind you.
But for the minorities it targets, it has been a red flag for decades. It is often said that this slogan should be tolerated because it is part of the ANC's culture and heritage.
How can a song be part of your whole culture? That should have fallen away after they came into power. And what amazes me, they haven't even thought what's going to happen when the white man's gone, either fled or until killed. What's going to happen then? Running overseas to go beg for more money? Yeah. Just have a look at, I'm telling you, Africa, the whole of Africa. It's going to end up like that. Each tribe warring against each other.
But we don't think that chanting for violent genocide can so easily be excused merely under the banner of culture. It was a go-to slogan for the ANC's military wing, Umkhonto weSizwe, or MK, during its armed struggle against the apartheid system in the last decades of the previous century. And it was especially popularized by the ANC Youth League president, Peter Mokaba. But this is just one of many such chants or songs. There are similar ones too, like Dubula Ibunu in Zulu, meaning shoot the Boer, and also Hamba Gashle Mkhonto, with lyrics vowing to kill the Boers. Now, defenders of these chants say that it's just a metaphor for overthrowing white minority rule and that it's not an actual call to violence. But we would do well to remember that during the ANC's armed struggle, these weren't just words. It was literally a call to violence.
Yeah.
Several ANC documents and conference decisions labeled white farmers in particular as enemies. At their 1985 Kabwe,
And yet, they will eat the food from the white farmer.
conference, for example, the ANC decided to drop the distinction between hard and soft targets, specifically hitting farms and especially border farms. Believe it or not, but ANC leaders made no secret of the fact that they regarded farmers, their wives, and their children as legitimate targets that could be killed.
Technically, people could say those farmers are just farmers, and these farmers were defending themselves. But we began to identify why we should regard them as targets. Also, there might be soft targets because, they're farmers and they have wives and children staying with them in those farms. And they might be with their families when they tread on those landmines that we wanted to plant on their farms. But we thought, since they are assisting and abating the system and trying to help the apartheid regime to survive, that they become legitimate targets.
And this did indeed lead to brutal attacks on civilians. The 1983 Church Street bomb in Pretoria killed 19 people and injured 207.
There were also black people that actually died in this. You are just, as far as they are actually concerned, in the wrong place at the wrong time.
During rush hour, the 1985 Amanzimtoti bomb by ANC Youth League member Andrew Zondo killed 5 women and children. The Messina landmine wiped out several members of the Van Eyck and the Nason families. And the 1986 Magoo's Bar bomb in Durban killed 3 and injured 69. Shockingly, after 1994, once the ANC took power, some of these perpetrators were honoured. Robert McBride, the man behind the Magoo's Bar bombing, became a member of parliament and head of the State Security Agency's foreign branch in 2020. Amanzimtoti's main road was renamed Andrew Zondo Road to honour the ANC youth member who murdered 5 women and children. But to be fair, anti-white violence was limited back then.
And this is what they do. They give so much honor to the people who have killed others. They can't tell the difference between good, evil. It's their whole mentality.
Over 90% of the 21,000 political deaths in apartheid's last 2 decades were as a result of black-on-black violence.
Thank you. I rest my case. I rest my case. 21,000 black-on-black violence. And how many whites did how many black people were killed by the whites? 2,100, I think. And this is the problem. Nobody knows about this. I made a video about it. Well, it was actually 2 parts. The first part, I think 5 people watched. How much of it, I don't know. And the second one, I think it was 167. I am so glad he is talking about this. They'd go and necklace people they actually suspected of working with the white people, with no actual proof, nothing. So let me get back to the point again. Which culture, which nation is more violent.
Especially between the ANC and rivals like Inkatha, Azapu, the Black
There,
Consciousness Movement,
there.
and so forth. Now, fast forward to contemporary threats from the ANC and government officials. As the ruling party since 1994, the ANC's leaders often normalize this rhetoric, painting white people as collective oppressors deserving of punishment.
What the hell is a 2-year-old little girl, a white 2-year-old little girl, guilty of? And then she is drowned? What? We love acting more righteous, more superior.
The political elite in South Africa has, for example, consistently described white ownership of land as illegitimate by definition, justifying calls that it ought to be confiscated. Now, of course, in the process, the method in which land was acquired is completely irrelevant and disregarded. Yes, there were indeed land dispossessions in the past, which is why there was a long and thorough process through which people could apply for land claims. But now, even land that was purchased legally is regarded by South Africa's political elite as illegitimate and worthy of redistribution for the mere reason that the owners are white. And white ownership, by definition, has to equate to illegitimate ownership. This narrative is then presented as a justification for calls for violence against the white minority, but against white farmers in particular. And opposing such calls for violence, remarkably, is met with accusations of racism. In 2012, Ronald Lamola, then ANC Youth League president and now Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, threatened in a press conference, and I quote, "I'm just giving a warning to white South Africans. They must voluntarily bring back the land and voluntarily bring back the mineral resources. There will be a moment when these service delivery protests will invade the land of Mr. van Tonder and Mr. van der Merwe, which is two well-known Afrikaans surnames, and we can no longer be able to guarantee the continued safety of Mr. van der Merwe."
And this is the absolute idiot. Like, just IQ hasn't got a smidgen of heat here. Who owns the mines in South Africa now? Who takes the minerals? It's not the white people. If there is, it's precious little. But Ramaphosa had 34 miners killed because they happened to have been striking, and he gave the order, kill them.
Just giving a warning to white South Africans that they must voluntarily bring back the land and voluntarily bring back the mineral resources. There will be a moment where these service delivery protests are going to go to invade the land of Mr. Van Tonder or Mr. Van der Merwe. And we can no longer be able to...
Just sucking out two names out of the air and thinking he is so clever. This one, he's got no life experience, nothing. He is just running on fumes of hate, apartheid.
guarantee the continued safety of Mr. Van der Merwe.
The statement clearly implies that violence would be meted out against those who do not comply with the demands of the ruling elite. Later in Durban, he called for an act as forceful as war for unapologetic redistribution. The ANC Youth League backed him, slamming
What about all the millions of blacks that are not part of this special thing at the top? Hey? What are they going to get? I can tell you right now, they are going to get nothing.
critics for defending white privilege. But alarmingly, farm murders spiked 60% in the month that followed on this highly publicized event. President Ramaphosa himself has fueled this, calling white land ownership the source of dispossession, and dispossession the original sin by colonial invaders. In 2012, then President Jacob Zuma sang a variation of Shoot the Boer at the ANC centenary celebrations.
From a person who, left school in when he was 9 or whatever. Hey? Following that, I am telling you now, this is disgusting. And they will go to the shops and buy the food farmed, grown, harvested by the white man. What is going to happen to all the millions of blacks throughout Africa? Famine is coming on such a large scale. But they'll be fine because they've got money. They can just fly overseas, get food, and come back. Yeah, party, jump
In the
and
month
dance.
that followed, farm attacks increased with 11% and farm murders with 36%. Yet former President Thabo Mbeki has reiterated his claim in 2025 that chanting about murdering farmers is not hate speech because the ANC doesn't mean it literally.
And chants of that kind in our tradition, in the African tradition, you don't take it literally.
Minister Gwedi Mantashe defended this chant, saying that banning it would be impractical, implying that people will not be deterred by a court order from chanting about murdering white farmers. Ramaphosa in 2025 refused to condemn it or to act against chanters, defending it under the banner of freedom of speech. In Parliament, ANC MP Duduzile Manana yelled, "Bury them alive," or according to some sources, burn them alive, during a parliamentary debate on farm murders. No action was taken against him. When Julius Malema led the ANC Youth League in 2010, he chanted Dubula Ibunu, or Shoot the Boer, at several public gatherings, including the University of Johannesburg. In the month that followed, farm murders rose by 51% and farm attacks by 88%. The public incitement of farm murders is, however, not limited to members of the public and politicians. In some cases, members of the South African Police Service also publicly encourage or romanticize farm murders or violence against white citizens in general. Umvelele Mulwane Gwabeni, a police officer in the Eastern Cape, posted on Facebook that we must continue to kill more of their farmers, at least to make up for what they did to us. Chris Gumotsu.
So he said that the people, the voters, must kill more white people because of what we, supposedly did, to them. This whole cycle is just vengeance, maliciousness, and hate. But they will do it because they don't know facts.
Who worked at the Gauteng Youth Crime Prevention Desk of the South African Police Service, stated that, and I quote, all white men deserve to die in the future. Fuck you, Mr. White Man. He also posted pictures of firearms and ammunition lying on a desk in a police station and added, I predict civil war in Mzansi, which means South Africa, by 2019. Take out your guns, fighters, because asiyiki, which means we won't turn back. Separate criminal charges were filed against Gwabeni and Gumotsu, but no progress about either of these cases is known to the public.
Not.
Another police officer, Constable Elvis Tabiso Setole, was charged for posting the following on Facebook. I normally suffocate a bit with a refuse bag this kind of racists before booking them in the holding cell because it doesn't leave any marks. They just become red, and after doing the paperwork, I lock them up and take the docket home so that no one can release them until they meet with the Honourable Magistrate in court the next court date.
And you want to tell me that that is normal behavior? That happens to be a person that holds a certain amount of, clout? Demonic.
When he was told that his comments would be reported to his station commander, he responded by saying, great news indeed. Now, these are just several examples. Many, many more could be added. What is abundantly clear already is that the ruling elite in South Africa has created a pattern that normalizes violence against minorities without consequences. Equally evident is the profound lack of response from mainstream human rights groups, political entities, and several media outlets and courts to this blatant genocidal rhetoric aimed at ethnic minorities. But, as I have mentioned, this is just part 1 in a series of 10. Once we have published each of the 10 sections, we will combine them into a comprehensive report which will be presented to Parliament, the President.
And this is why I despise, I'm now going to say it, I despise the left. I absolutely despise it because they have got selective favoritism. And they are so self-righteous. So, right. Let us start. Number 2. And
from Lex Libertas.
Okay, so this is number 2. This is horrific. This is the leaders the ANC, MK. This is their leaders. And the people on the ground are following orders, murdering other people, white people and brown people, all based on a lie. Let us hide the history. Let us make up stories about the white man. And they will sit in power. And okay, that power will just go down to somebody else just like them. Okay, let's get into it.
In this video, I'm discussing part 2 of our new report, Unmasking the Bully Within, the Persecution of Minorities by South Africa's Ruling Elite. Part 2 deals with the extent to which the political elite in South Africa have resorted to the vilification of ethnic minorities and scapegoating in order to deflect attention from their own failures. Now, why do we need to talk about scapegoating in South Africa?
It's important.
Because in South Africa, corruption slithers like a snake in the halls of power. As serpents coil at the throne, members of the political elite strikes at whichever department offers the opportunity, draining the hard-earned resources of an overburdened public while blaming ethnic minorities for the venom they leave behind. The rot starts at the very top. A recent report revealed that an estimated 500 billion to 1 trillion South African rands have been lost to state capture and corruption over the past decade. What little remains after the feasting on public office is devoured by destructive policies such as black economic empowerment and so-called affirmative action. A recent report by the Free Market Foundation and Solidarity estimate that these policies cost South Africa approximately 145 to 290 billion South African rands in compliance costs per year. By their very design, these race-based policies operate as discriminatory laws, excluding ethnic minorities from certain economic and employment opportunities. And despite the obvious trail of devastation that is left by its corruption, the ANC has perfected the art of scapegoating ethnic minorities to evade accountability and cling to power. And so let's talk about the weaponization of the term white monopoly capital. We know now that the term white monopoly capital was weaponized in South Africa by the British PR firm Bell Pottinger around 2016 and 2017 to deflect attention from the Gupta family and former President Jacob Zuma amid state capture and corruption allegations. They targeted wealthy white businessmen and journalists who had begun investigating their activities. In 2017, veteran journalist Peter Bruce reported his first-hand experience of this intimidation campaign. While investigating the Guptas and state capture allegations, members of the radical Black First, Land First movement came to his Johannesburg home, defaced his property with signs like land or death, and accused him of being a white monopoly capital propagandist.
And let me guarantee, these people, they haven't got a clue what's going on. They've heard one side of the story, and they will sit there and make a noise and kill.
The Gupta Leaks website was launched in 2017 as a collaborative investigation by several journalists attempting to expose those implicated in the state capture scandal. In response, the White Monopoly Capital Leaks website, an online intimidation campaign, was anonymously launched, detailing disturbing surveillance of numerous journalists searching for answers. white monopoly capital leaks smeared critics as agents of white monopoly capital and lapdogs of the Rupert family. Black journalists reporting on the allegations were labeled as askaris or traitors, and any journalist who chose to continue digging for answers did so at great personal risk.
White monopoly capital.
White monopoly capital.
White monopoly capital.
White monopoly capital.
Monopoly capital.
White monopoly capital.
White monopoly capital.
The message was clear. The real problem is not politicians stealing money, but an abstract term which suggests that white people own everything and that they should be targeted instead.
At my age, what do I own? I know many, many white people. What do they own? If we want to buy a house, we have to pay for the land, the house, rates and taxes. Okay? On top of it, taxed as well. A black man can just go to a piece of land, knock up a shack. That land he has not paid. Okay? He steals the metal and all the things to actually build with. Or, okay, he might get it cheap, whatever. I'm so over this thing of white people own. I'm saying everything. We don't. We don't. And guess what? We actually worked for okay, everything we have.
In other words, leave us alone as we loot your tax money. Be angry at those minorities over there instead. By August 2017, the Public Relations and Communications Association had found Bell Pottinger guilty of breaching its professional charter and public affairs and lobbying code. Though this resulted in the firm's expulsion and the resignation of CEO James Henderson, the damage was done. By mid-2025, despite the implication of over 1,438 people and over 1 billion South African rand spent on investigations, the vast majority of high-ranking officials implicated in state capture and corruption have never faced justice. This is a glaringly obvious case of the scapegoating of minorities to evade accountability. The strategic vilification by ANC officials and members of the political elite extends far beyond the scope of investigative entities, however. Prominent political figures have repeatedly blamed white minorities for the so-called original sin of land disposition and, by implication, the landlessness of black South Africans today. Central to this narrative is the claim that white people own 70% of the land.
That story I've heard. That story I've heard. And this is spread by the left and spread by useful, absolute idiots that know nothing. So, let's get this into perspective once and for all, okay? I'm just trying to find the thing now. There was a pie chart. Are you joking? Now I can't find it. Okay, yeah. Let me make it big. as you can see on my phone, right? Who holds the biggest piece of, the pie? Who? But it's got there only 12% of, that whole pie. That whole pie. That is not 12%. And this is why people don't look at things and think about it. And then the white people own 70. Is that small piece 70? Yeah. And if you don't understand that, then get a cake and actually make it, right, exactly the same. And which piece is going to be larger? Figure it out, man.
A figure that is routinely presented without context. In reality, this statistic refers only to privately owned agricultural land that is held by individuals, not to the total of South Africa's land mass. By deliberately extrapolating this narrow data point to all land ownership, political actors misrepresent land statistics to portray ethnic minorities as illegitimate occupiers, to legitimize dispossession, and importantly, to deflect accountability from state corruption and policy failure. In November 2017, President Cyril Ramaphosa blamed the suffering of black people in South Africa on the country's ethnic minorities, claiming that our land was stolen from our forebears, leading to the destruction of the asset base of the African people and resulting in the impoverishment of the black nation.
Okay, as I've said before, and I will say it, when Jan van Riebeeck came, there were only 2 or 3 African groups here. There were no Zulus here. There were the Daksan people, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was the Xhosa and the Matabele. There were no Zulus here. And then, the white people came. Then later in the 1700s, Shaka Zulu came down from Nigeria. So who actually invaded? But it's so easy to actually have people following you, and you don't give them the real history. You don't give them the real facts. It's so easy. And you just follow your nose and the person in front of you and just chant the same thing without hearing any other view.
In other words, if you are poor, you should blame white people. Not to be outdone by her ANC colleague, former Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, a presidential candidate at the time, claimed that white people have looted and even stolen the land from black people and yet they complain about the ANC's plans for radical economic transformation. By employing a destructive cocktail of fear-mongering and vilification, the ANC has retained its 31-year grip on power. When speaking to disgruntled and disillusioned ANC voters in Limpopo, President Ramaphosa invoked past fears to regain support back in 2013. In answer to an unemployed single mother in Seshego vowing never to vote ANC again, Ramaphosa claimed that, and I quote, "If you don't vote ANC, the Boers will come back to control us." Members of the South African government have even...
So who is actually controlling who here? Who? I have spoken to many black people my age, and they want the white man back. They have told me they can't find work. Their pension is so small. They have to feed themselves and their grandchildren on, I think it's 2,400 rand a month. And they go to the shops and they cannot survive. And their children just want jobs. And then, okay, ANC tell Musk and all these people that, okay, want to come here and start businesses to go away. So who is actually controlling who? At the end of the day, let us cut through all the bullshit right now and face cold hard facts. These people will not give up power without war.
Even claimed that Afrikaans, the native language of a significant portion of South Africa's ethnic minority, is an ugly language, and that the problem with Afrikaner men is their Calvinist religion, which allegedly teaches them that they own women and that they can kill them if they wish.
Young Afrikaner men are brought up in the Calvinist religion, believing that they own a woman, they own a child, they own everything, and therefore they can take that life because they own it.
Major.
And this is the kind of rhetoric I hate. She hasn't got a clue what she is talking about. But boy, if she can be on the camera out there, she is willing to lie.
Influential political figures have often adopted an openly anti-white posture, distorting historical facts and stirring racial tensions. While speaking at an ANC fundraising dinner in Cape Town in 2015, former President Jacob Zuma stated, "You must remember that a white man called Jan van Riebeeck arrived here on 6 April 1652, and that was the start of the trouble in this country." What followed were numerous struggles and wars and deaths and the seizure of land and the deprivation of indigenous peoples' political and economic power. Now, Jan van Riebeeck, a 17th century Dutch administrator, established a refreshment station at the Cape of Good Hope in 1652 on behalf of the Dutch East.
So, Jan came to the Cape and actually built a anti-refreshment station. And that was the start. There were no buildings here. Mud huts, yes, but no buildings.
East India Company. In 1662, after a promotion by the Dutch East India Company, he left South Africa to serve as commander of the settlement at Malacca, which is in modern-day Malaysia. The ANC's frequent and continual demonization of Van Riebeeck, often referenced as a symbolic ancestor of Afrikaners in South Africa or white people in general, represents a deliberate distortion of the historical origins of the Afrikaner community. Now, warnings from minority rights champions. Reading between the lines, several minority rights organizations and champions, including former party leader of the Freedom Front Plus, Dr. Pieter Mulder, have expressed deep concern at President Zuma's distortion of Afrikaner-related history. At a joint sitting debate at Parliament, Dr. Mulder addressed Zuma's racialized comments. He said, "The Honourable President says that a man called Jan van Riebeeck arrived here, and that was the start of problems in the country. I can prove the President is wrong. But what did he say in plain language? He said, when white people arrived here, the trouble started. What is the
If that is the case, then why do you use so many things made by white people? Fridges, washing machines, cars, clothes, phones, TVs, computers, medicine. Then cut everything, okay, created, made by white people, and see how far you bloody get. But do not turn normal, okay, blacks against the whites. Because I can still remember during the 1970s, 80s, and the 60s, I'm sure of it, so many Afrikaner churches went to black schools with huge pots of soup, with so many rolls to, okay, feed them. And then there was always this thing about pencils and crayons and books and that kind of thing. What has the ANC done? Nothing.
understanding of ordinary ANC supporters? They understand that if one gets rid of the white man, all the problems are solved. Get rid of the cockroaches and the problems go away. In an open letter, Dave Stewart, former Chief of Staff to President F.W. de Klerk and Executive Director at the F.W. de Klerk Foundation at the time, expressed his concern towards the ANC's persistent anti-Van Riebeeck campaign, stating that the anti-Jan van Riebeeck campaign is yet another example of the disturbing and increasingly overt anti-white posture of the President and the ANC. Indeed, the ANC's core program, its National Democratic Revolution, is the continuation and completion of its liberation struggle against white South Africans whom it views as antagonists. In the same letter, Stewart records the words of the Shoot the Boer song, which was sung at the ANC's centenary celebrations in Bloemfontein by President Jacob Zuma. We are going to shoot them. They are going to run. We are going to shoot them with a machine gun. They are going to run. You are a white man. We are going to hit them and you are going to run. Shoot the Boer. We are going to hit them. They are going to run. The cabinet will shoot them with a machine gun. The cabinet will shoot them with the machine gun. Shoot the Boer.
Wearing that. Who came up with that? The white man. Who came up with that shirt? The white man. Who came up with that? That will put same thing, the white man. And he's wearing glasses, the white man.
In the letter, Stewart noted, "Can one imagine the leader of any respectable country in the world expressing such deplorable views about a national minority?" But the marginalized ethnic community's fears fell on deaf ears. Unfazed by the existential threat experienced by many within the Afrikaner community as a direct result of the ANC's government's antagonistic stance towards ethnic minorities, Zuma merely doubled down on his divisive comments. In what News 24 described as a 12-minute lecture in how the arrival of the first white settlers affected black people, Zuma responded to Dr. Mulder's comment, stating that, "When I said when Jan van Riebeeck landed in the Cape, our problems began, it is a historical fact."
When I said when Jan van Riebeeck landed
And he's wearing a suit by the white man.
in the Western Cape, our problems began, is a historic fact.
By scapegoating South Africa's ethnic minorities and strategically distorting historical facts.
So then, okay, if it's a fact, then why do they keep on running to Western countries with the begging bowl, asking for money? Why?
The ANC government and its fellow ideologues have weaponized fear and vilification into a seemingly impenetrable shield, allowing them to retain power and escape accountability, even at the cost of the people they have sworn to serve. In its desperate bid to cling to power, the ANC has knowingly set fire to the very country it was sworn to protect, content to rule over the ashes rather than face accountability.
And just
This was
bones.
part 2 in a series of 10. Once we have published each of the 10 sections, we will combine them into a comprehensive report.
So many lies have been actually said about this. Okay, I'll do episode 3.
Hello everyone, this is...
But I'm finding it exceptionally heavy. Yeah, so I'll do this because it's only 12.5 minutes long. So, let's get into it.
Is Ernest Roots from Lex Libertas. In this video, we look into part 3 of our report, Unmasking the Bully Within, the Persecution of Minorities by South Africa's Ruling Elite. Part 3 deals with race laws. The post-1994 era in South Africa was heralded as a triumph of non-racial democracy. Yet the persistence and expansion of race-based legislation has undermined this ideal. Rather than dismantling the racial classifications inherited from apartheid, successive governments have entrenched them through a proliferating framework of laws and policies that explicitly discriminate against minorities on the basis of race. These measures, primarily justified under the banner of redress for historical injustices, have instead institutionalized a new form of systemic discrimination against minority groups, particularly against white, colored, and Indian people in South Africa, by imposing barriers to employment, economic participation, and property rights. South Africa now has more race-based laws than at the height of apartheid. By 2025, estimates place the number of operative statutes, regulations, and policies referencing race or using race as a proxy for how people ought to be treated at more than 145, with the majority of them introduced since 1994. This represents a continuation and an intensification of attempted racial engineering, where the state classifies citizens into categories, black, colored, Indian, and white, to allocate opportunities according to these categories, often or usually at the exclusion or the disadvantaged of non-black groups. Central to this framework is the broad-based
And this whole thing that, and I have asked some blacks, and in their language, they haven't got a word that means racist. So thereby, they can't be racist, but their whole speech, actions are okay racist. I might be wrong, but I have asked many black people.
Black Economic Empowerment, or BBBEE Act, which proclaims to promote the economic empowerment of black people, including women, youth, workers, people with disabilities, and rural communities. It does this, or it seeks to do this, through strategies like increasing ownership and management of enterprises, skills development, equitable workforce representation, preferable procurement, and targeted investment. Complementing this,
If they really wanted to help their fellow black man, they would have welcomed Muskia. They would have, excuse me, welcomed, sorry, so many overseas companies to come here. They don't want to help anybody but themselves.
is affirmative action legislation under the Employment Equity Act, or EEA, which mandates measures to ensure that suitably qualified people from designated groups, primarily black, colored, and Indian individuals, as well as women and people with disabilities, have equal employment opportunities and equitable representation across all occupational levels. Now, these regulations may appear benign or even progressive at first glance, but they mask race-based rules with terms like redress and equal opportunities. By framing racially exclusionary policies in democratic language, the ANC government maintains international support while enforcing internal control. Labeling race-based regulations as fair is akin to claiming that North Korea is democratic because it calls itself the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
They really don't understand. North Korea is one of the most controlled countries in the world. If you happen to be a foreigner and you're going there for just to go and sightsee, they chase the poor people away because they don't want it to be known that they happen to be poor there. They literally chase them away. And this is the thing that gets me. The ANC and all the so-called other parties, they are stuck in communism. They will not change. Yes, I actually read somewhere it's like the year 1920 And this whole mentality is taking over the world.
While employment equity explicitly allows numerical goals, but allegedly excludes quotas, the reality of BBBEE implementation often demands specific targets such as 30% black ownership in businesses, depending on employer numbers and turnover. Failure to comply often results in the government using indirect mechanisms to enforce adherence, disproportionately burdening minority owned enterprises and limiting their economic viability. Broad based black economic empowerment operates via a scorecard system for certification, where small to medium sized companies incur annual audit costs ranging from 10,000 South African rands to 30,000 South African rands. It has been estimated that broad based black economic empowerment and affirmative action impose annual compliance costs of 145 to 219 billion South African rands, equivalent to 2 to 4% of GDP, and have contributed to cumulative economic drag exceeding 5 trillion since their inception. Non-compliance leads to exclusion from government contracts, tenders, and supplier databases, as well as reputational damage that can deter clients and investors. Entities misrepresenting compliance face fines of up to 10% of annual turnover, criminal prosecution, or imprisonment for up to 10 years. Re-audits, if required, can cost between 50 and
Okay, so if there is a company that's white owned, and this company employs black people and white people, and okay, if this man, owner, or lady does not comply, that person could go to jail. What does that mean? The company's going to close down. More people out of work. Every action has got a consequence. They don't care how many lives until you destroy or ruin, as long as until every box is ticked.
300,000 South African rands, further straining minority-led businesses that may not qualify for preferential treatment. While broad-based black economic empowerment's stated intent is to redress historical injustices, it has often exacerbated inequalities, particularly for minorities who face de facto exclusion from opportunities reserved for designated groups. Polls from the Institute of Race Relations indicate that only about 15% of black South Africans have reported benefiting from BBBEE, leaving over 85% unaffected.
And those people who have benefited are part of that top part. Family members and friends and this.
Meanwhile, South Africa's unemployment rate, using Statistics South Africa's expanded definition, has risen from approximately 31.5% in 1994 to 43.1% in 2025, which means that as these so-called pro-black policies have been implemented, black people in South Africa have become poorer. Despite calls from business lobbies, advocacy groups, and economists to scrap these policies, the ANC has pushed for stricter enforcement. Eustace Day.
And then I heard that the young people without jobs is 65%. And these black people, youth, have got to matric diplomas and all that. But most of them will vote for Juju. Utopia is coming. This unto you pot of gold is coming. Let me tell you right now that unto you so-called pot does not exist.
Levy, director at the Free Market Foundation, has stated, corruption in South Africa has not grown by accident. It has been made possible by law. The policy of black economic empowerment, presented as a means of redress, has in practice become the legal and moral cover for large-scale theft. Professor William Gumede has noted that BEE only benefits a very small group of politically connected people.
Yeah.
The same people
We know that.
empowered again and again, and described it as state-sanctioned looting under the guise of empowerment. Yet, Deputy President Paul Mashatile, in a 2025 National Council of Provinces session, hailed broad-based black economic empowerment's so-called transformative success and insisted that it is not a failed policy. In fact, he said, I think it must be implemented more rigorously. When pressed on its failures and economic impediments, Mashatile equated scrapping broad-based black economic empowerment with going back to apartheid. So ironically, the claim is that getting rid of racial exclusionary laws implies going back to apartheid. Racial quotas under affirmative action have extended beyond economics into nearly every societal sphere, often marginalizing minorities. In 2019, South African schools athletics issued a memo requiring at least 40% of district, provincial, and national primary and high school athletic teams to compromise so-called players of color. Although withdrawn amid backlash, the broader sports transformation framework persists under national oversight bodies. In 2012, the Jacaranda Children's Home in Pretoria lost corporate support because 70% of its orphans were white, failing to meet black empowerment criteria for funding.
Isn't that pathetic? A children's home. And I know of one other one, but I'm not going to talk about that one. But they actually want the same number, so they want 4% orphans and whatever the other one is to be black orphans. And yet they keep quiet about the thousands of children starving in the country every year. These people really are just like they've got no stop and think about the consequences. They will hold on to power until there are mountains of bones throughout Africa.
In 2023, the Department of Water and Sanitation proposed draft regulations tying water use licenses to minimum black shareholding thresholds of up to 75%, drawing outrage from agricultural communities already facing resource constraints. In 2024, the IRR sought to have a meeting with the South African Human Rights Commission to address the surge in race laws, noting at the time 141 racialized acts of parliament in operation, up from 52 in 1996. Campaign manager Makoni Maya stated, simply put, there have never been as many race-based laws, regulations, and directives in South African history than today, not even at the peak of apartheid. During the apartheid,
Let Just let that sink in. But they will complain and bitch and whine about, oh, we can go to the white toilets and we can drink from the white man's fountain. We built you your own toilets. We built your own fountains.
System, the ANC led the fight against racial segregation. Walter Sisulu, a prominent ANC leader, declared that the fundamental principle in our struggle is equal rights for all in our country, and that all people who have made South Africa their home by birth or adoption, irrespective of color or creed, are entitled to these rights. It is now clear that the ANC's critique of race laws before 1994 was only a power move and not a genuine condemnation of race discrimination. The ANC called apartheid a crime against humanity due to race laws, expropriation of property, and double standards with regard to freedom of belief and freedom of speech. Now they are violating all these things they once claimed to champion. Whether affecting everyday workers, business owners, farmers seeking drought relief, aspiring athletes, or orphans, the ANC government's fixation on race spares not a single person in South Africa, perpetuating division and disadvantaging minorities in a system that prioritizes racial metrics over merit and equality. This video is part 3 in a series of 10. Once we have published,
and this is what is so sickening to me, is that whatever he is saying will not be actually believed, because it's a white man speaking. How many lies have been told by Ramaphosa, Gigi, Zuma, and all the others? How many lies? How long is it going to take for the normal black South African to actually wake up? How long? Your own people are dying. All right, thanks for watching. I'll carry on with the other ones about this some other time. Okay, bye.